We have an incredibly interesting report that was released last week, and it's about none other than Carvana. The report was published by Hindenburg Research, a firm specializing in financial forensic research, and the report is titled Carvana, a father-son accounting grift of the ages. And man, oh man, is this a doozy. Now, almost exactly 2 years ago, I gained a lot of steam on my channel talking about Carvana, and for nearly a year, I covered the downfall of the company. If you want to check those videos out, I will include a link to them down in the description below. But in order to not only give you some backstory into what we're going to be talking about today, but to also give you the Cliff's Notes version of the videos that I've made about Carvana in the past, let me give you a brief synopsis of what has happened thus far. During the pandemic, Carvana rose to become a stock market darling because of their direct-to-consumer online dealership strategy. During this time, many online-first dealerships took off, with Carvana being the biggest, but Shift and Vroom being two other notable ones, but both have already closed their doors. Carvana was founded and is largely run by a father-son duo, Ernest Garcia II, the father, who is also CEO and founder of Drive Time Automotive, and Ernest Garcia III, the son, who is the CEO of Carvana. So as I mentioned, Carvana blows up during the pandemic, but they are a disaster. Sure, their stock price was crazy high, but they were racking up insane amounts of debt and they weren't making a profit. Customers were complaining left and right about not getting their titles on time, being sold stolen or inaccurate vehicles, titles being bad when Carvana said they were clean. Multiple states even banned Carvana, and Illinois pressed charges against the company. But the company and the stock price kept climbing, and Ernest Garcia II and the third ended up making a killing. And during this time, Ernest Garcia II and III had set up Carvana in a way in which, despite the fact that this company was publicly traded, they were able to run the company and the business as if it was a family operation, with some experts at the time reporting that they had never seen a publicly traded company being ran in this manner. But Carvana's rise to fame was somewhat short-lived, and just a few years after the company skyrocketed, the company was drowning in debt, their stock price was tanking, and in 2023, the discussions of bankruptcy were being had, with a poison pill being implemented, a telltale sign that at the very least, bankruptcy was on the table. But throughout 2024, Carvana did in fact not go bankrupt. In fact, they did quite the opposite, going from all-time highs in 2021 to basically becoming a penny stock in 2023. Carvana stock has now risen by 284% in 2024, with many investors believing the worst is in the past. But this research paper that was just released paints a very, very different picture. Now, I did read the report, so you don't have to, but if you're interested in checking it out, it is very interesting, and there are points within the report that I'm not going to touch on in this video for the sake of clarity and not being too confusing. But if you want to check it out yourself, I will include a link to it down in the description below. Now, the report starts off by saying, despite Carvana rising by 284% this year, our research, including extensive document review and 49 interviews with industry experts, former Carvana employees, competitors, and related parties of the company, undertaken over the course of 4 months, shows that Carvana's turnaround is a mirage. Now, the foundations of the accusation here really stem around the idea that Carvana is pulling levers and taking part in deceptive tax, accounting, and operational strategies to make it look like they have less expenses than they really do, and to make it look like they're making more money than they actually are. Now, we of course will go deeper into this in this video. Some of these service level accusations is that $800 million worth of loans were sold to an undisclosed related party, with evidence of accounting manipulation and lax underwriting, all which have given the company the ability to inflate or deflate their numbers depending on the category. Now, this is the foundational complaint and accusation of this report, but where all of this really lies is with Carvana's business model. And Carvana's business has been for a long time, at least for as long as I've been covering and keeping tabs on the company, isn't actually the business of selling cars, but it is instead the business of originating loans. And selling cars is just sort of a byproduct of that. How Carvana business model works outside of selling a person an individual car is Carvana gives customers loans. So you buy a car from Carvana, you take out the loan. This is the point of loan origination. Carvana originates the loans, and then whenever they have a bunch of loans, like millions, if not billions of dollars worth, they then sell that debt to a buyer or a debt investor in the form of an asset-backed security. And in the context of Carvana, it is specifically an auto asset-backed security. Now, a company selling an asset-backed security or ABS to an investor, it is extremely common, whether it's an auto asset-backed security, which is what we're talking about in the context of Carvana, but they are also very common in the world of home mortgages as well. And the business model of originating car loans then sell to an investor, it is a fine business model. Well, maybe it's not fine, but it certainly is a business model that's common, and it's one that works under a certain set of circumstances. For example, this business model works really well whenever the car market is doing well and people are buying cars in large numbers, which is why we saw an influx of these types of securities during 2021 and 2022 when the car market was booming. It also works well whenever delinquency rates are low and people are not going delinquent or falling behind on their car loans. Again, a scenario that we saw play out just a few short years ago. Both of these were also true whenever Carvana had their meteoric rise to fame, but in the case of present day, neither of these are true. The car market is down over 20%, and auto loan delinquencies are and have been on the rise. What makes matters worse is Carvana's business model isn't just originating loans, it's originating subprime loans, which are loans held by the riskiest borrowers, people with low credit scores. And whenever we're talking about an auto ABS, investors want to have a mix of subprime and prime borrowers because at the end of the day, prime borrowers, so people with good credit scores, they are ultimately going to be a safer investment, but they are also going to yield a lower return. Whereas subprime loans or even deep subprime loans, they are significantly more risky because they come with higher default rates. They also yield much higher returns because of the higher interest rates associated with them. And so whenever a company is originating a bunch of loans for the purpose of selling that to an investor, which Carvana has done many times over, typically you want to see a diverse palette of the investor types that are included in that asset-backed security in order to kind of level off and mitigate risk. Well, this research paper claims that due to Carvana's lax underwriting, not only is the company giving out too many loans to risky subprime borrowers, but 44% of Carvana's loans it sells in ABS deals are non-prime, with over 80% of recent non-prime ABS deals having a weighted average FICO score in the deep subprime range, which is again the worst type of borrower. So not only do these auto asset-backed securities, which Carvana is then selling, not only do they make up of too many subprime borrowers, but they also make up too many deep subprime borrowers as well. Where have we seen this before? Loose underwriting, risky borrowers.
I think I've seen this film before, and I didn't like the ending.
Oh yeah, the Great Recession.
Somewhere along the line, these B's and double B's went from a little risky to dog shit. Where's the trash?
Right behind you.
I'm talking rock bottom FICO scores. No income verification.
Now, I am partially joking. While this was a very real part of the 2008 financial crisis, loose underwriting and standards leading to risky loans, I am not insinuating that Carvana taking part in this practice is the equivalent of an entire industry doing it. Though I do think that if we were to take a deep dive into the car market as a whole, we would find some things that are eerily similar to the 2008 crisis, but that's a topic for another video. The point is, Carvana makes their money from originating loans and selling them. Carvana also originates a ton of risky loans. According to a Carvana source, the company approved nearly 100% of the people who applied for car loans through the company. And according to Hindenburg Research, Carvana has a delinquency rate 4 times higher than the rate of the industry average. And understanding this is the foundation of the claims that we're about to dig deeper into. Now, we've covered what Carvana does and what their general business model is. But now we have to dive into the bigger issue and where the bold claim that Carvana is a grift, where that comes from. Now, I mentioned earlier that Carvana's business model is really just the business model of originating loans and then selling them in bulk. And while this business model did do well in the past whenever the car market was skyrocketing, and can, generally speaking, do well when the car market is doing well, one key factor here is that you have to have a buyer for the loans that you're trying to sell, because you can only sell a ton of debt if somebody's willing to buy it. Now, historically speaking, Carvana has had one favorite buyer when it comes to their ABSs, and that's Ally Bank. In fact, in 2023, 60% of all loans Carvana originated and then sold were sold to Ally Bank, which is not only risky, but it becomes even more risky whenever Ally Bank has made it clear they're going to begin the process of scaling back on their purchases with Carvana, as these asset-backed securities are becoming more risky and less lucrative. In fact, one Ally Bank representative confirmed that Ally was in fact going to be continuing to pull back on Carvana and that they would be addressing the renegotiation, a process that in the past has left Carvana investors a bit in the dark. But another Ally Bank executive had this to say whenever it came to Carvana asset-backed securities. Those numbers, my heart might have skipped a few beats. Those loss numbers are high. The delinquencies across 30-60 buckets are high. This is basically saying that the Carvana asset-backed securities that Ally Bank is buying and seeing and owns, they have a higher delinquency rate than they really should. At the same time, the amount of Carvana auto loans Ally Financial has invested in has become concentrated, and in September of 2024, Ally stock fell 20% after the company warned investors, and I quote, "On the retail auto side, our credit challenges have intensified." So Ally Bank has invested in a concentrated amount of asset-backed securities through Carvana. Their stock is tanking, and their auto loan credit situation is challenging. Not a good sign for Carvana. But fear not, because Carvana has a plan, or at least they say they do. Over the past 6 years, Carvana has repeatedly told their investors that they are looking to diversify their buyers for their asset-backed securities, a diversification that the company has desperately needed for a long time. But for one reason or another, these investment partners that Carvana has tried to line up time and time again, these deals just never come to fruition. That is until 2024. I mentioned earlier that Carvana relies heavily on Ally Bank in order to sell their asset-backed securities. But in 2024, Carvana was faced with an issue, and that issue was that Ally Bank was scaling back on their investments with Carvana, going from purchasing nearly 60% of all Carvana auto asset-backed securities to only purchasing 35% in 2024. But at the perfect time, Carvana found an unrelated third party, aka an unnamed buyer, who was willing to purchase $800 million worth of asset-backed securities from Carvana. And according to this Hindenburg research report, this buyer made up 18.3% and 16.3% of total loan sales during this Q2 and Q3 of 2024. So again, Carvana relies heavily on Ally Bank for many years. Repeatedly tells investors, don't worry guys, we're diversifying, we're finding more investors, but also repeatedly fails to do so. But right as Ally Bank actually begins to scale back their business, Carvana finds a mystery buyer to buy hundreds of millions of dollars in asset-backed securities. Now, while Carvana may want you to think that this is truly an unrelated third-party buyer, it probably doesn't shock you to see that there is evidence to suggest that this buyer is in fact not unrelated, and that it is instead just simply an undisclosed third-party buyer. Now, this is where things can get a little bit confusing, so I'm going to take the long and confusing and try to turn it into short and simple. While Carvana did not disclose the party who bought $800 million in backed securities, paperwork filings indicate that it was very likely a company called Toad Point Auto, which is a company that seems to be affiliated with Cerberus Capital Management, a large brand asset manager. And Dan Quayle, a director at Carvana, is also a chairman at Cerberus Capital Management. And according to Hindenburg Research, the same Dan Quayle has sold $3 million in Carvana stock this year, whenever in the past he hasn't sold any, not even when the company IPO'd. This $3 million equates to nearly half of all of the holdings that Dan Quayle has. So again, just so that we're all on the same page here, Carvana originates loans, and they are in the business of originating loans and then selling them to investors. They create an arguably toxic reliance on Ally Bank, their biggest customer. Carvana struggles to diversify despite the fact that they made promises to do just that. Ally Bank pulls back. Carvana magically finds an additional investor who they don't disclose, but is a company that looks to be affiliated with their own director. Now, I think that this is a good time to dive into a topic that I alluded to earlier, and that is the discussion of accounting manipulation, which is one of the many accusations that Hindenburg Research is making in this report, which is basically the idea that Carvana is doing manipulative things to make the company look like they're doing better than they really are. Now, one way Carvana seems to be giving the facade that their loans are performing better than they are in reality is through loan extensions. When a borrower starts to fall behind in their loan, their creditor may offer a loan extension. This is a way to give the borrower a chance to catch up and avoid going delinquent. From the perspective of Carvana, giving a borrower an extension could be advantageous because you don't want a bunch of your loans to be shown as delinquent, and it's much better to show them as extended because a delinquency does not look good for an investor who's wanting to buy those loans. Over the last year, Carvana's extensions have more than doubled, while extensions over the same period of time by other creditors have actually gone down. Another company that did see an increase in extension was Drive Time Automotive, the company that is founded and ran by Ernest Garcia II, the father of the CEO of Carvana, Ernest Garcia III. Now, the extensions in and of themselves do feel a bit shady, but it does get a bit shadier whenever you look at how these extensions are issued in the case of Drive Time Automotive and Carvana versus how they're typically issued with the car market as a whole. Typically, a loan servicer and a loan issuer are two different peoples or two different entities. This is to maintain a level of bias as the loan is being paid off, and it's to make sure that at least some degree the loan servicer is working towards the best interest of the borrower. Well, in Carvana's case, Carvana is the loan issuer, but the loan servicer is actually an affiliate of Drive Time Automotive, the same company owned by the father of Carvana's CEO, indicating that maybe these loan issuers aren't as unbiased as they should be and certainly aren't working towards helping the borrower, but instead is issuing extensions that give the illusion that delinquencies aren't as big of a problem as they would otherwise be. But the relationship between Drive Time Automotive and Carvana, that relationship doesn't end with loans. There are reports of Carvana dumping unreported costs of extended warranties onto Drive Time Automotive in order to artificially inflate their own revenue and profitability. Carvana also issues their warranty through an affiliate with Drive Time Automotive, and there are reports that the amount of money that Carvana is making off of that warranty is also inflated, with the report showing that Carvana has 58% higher warranty income than any other similar company. Another major problem for car dealerships is offloading inventory, especially as that inventory begins to age, and this is another problem that Carvana doesn't necessarily have to the same degree as other dealerships because, again, of their relationship with Drive Time. There are reports of Drive Time Automotive buying cars from Carvana at generous price points in order for Carvana to avoid having to mark down inventory to offload it. This is another tactic used to artificially decrease costs and increase profitability. And this is no small section of Carvana's business. In the last 3 years, Carvana has generated a whopping $105 million in revenue selling cars wholesale to Drive Time Automotive, a practice described by a former Carvana director responsible for wholesale inventory as a lever that is not talked about. It's kind of like Fight Club. There's certain things we don't talk about, and we don't talk about Drive Time. By offloading costs, extending debt for bad borrowers, all through their relationship with Drive Time Automotive, this is creating an illusion of lower costs and higher profitability. All of this has resulted in an inflated retail GPU, or retail gross profit per unit, which is basically the metric that measures how much a automaker or a dealership is making off of each individual car that they sell. And this is not only a metric that's important to see the overall growth of the car market and dealerships as a whole, but it's also incredibly important for investors whenever they're looking at the health of a company. And Carvana has reportedly offloaded the largest expenses associated with retail GPU, the three being title and registration, limited warranty, and outbound logistics. And it seems as though Carvana has offloaded these expenses to Drive Time Automotive. This is in turn keeping their costs down, it's keeping their GPU high, and it's giving the idea that they're making a lot more on each individual car than they really are. Now, there is a lot more that I could talk about, including the fact that there are reports that Carvana has lowered their quality standard in order to cut costs, that Ernest Garcia II and III have bought and sold stock of their company to manipulate the books and thus the stock price, and that the party responsible for their financial audits is someone with close ties to the company, thus allowing everything I've spoken about so far to be swiped under the rug. But truthfully, if I was to go into every single detail of this report, this video would be an hour long. Now, if all that I've stated in this video is true, which I don't know about you, but I am certainly not making such an accusation in a public forum. But if it was true, you may be wondering why. And the reason is simple: to make a load of money. Ernest Garcia II, the father of Carvana CEO and the CEO of Drive Time Automotive, has sold $3.6 billion in Carvana stock in recent years. And in the words of Hindenburg Research, I quote, "In the end, the Garcias will beg millions. For customers, they face the prospect of inferior or potentially dangerous cars due to cost-cutting measures, favoring the bottom line over quality and safety. For shareholders and debt holders, we expect they are in for rough times ahead." Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.